Okay, so today we're taking a deep dive into the life of someone named Bruce.
Oh, wow. This is going to be good.
Yeah, and it's really heavy stuff, but so important. We've got excerpts from his personal writings where he talks about experiencing abuse as a child,
Right.
and we're also going to be looking at a lot of his book. It's called Three Times a Victim, Living Under the Shadow of Toxic Shame.
Ooh, that title.
Right, so intense. And really, what we want to do is try to understand him. Like, what were the things that happened early on?
Yeah. Yeah.
The connections that really shaped his path, and how all of this ultimately led him to become a therapist.
Like, how did he get from there to here? It's incredible.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I think more than anything, I want to feel a sense of, I don't know, care for his journey.
Absolutely. It's about understanding, but it's also about really caring about what this guy went through.
100%. Okay, so let's jump in. Right off the bat, there's this super powerful memory he shares. He's at the YMCA pool, and he's feeling safe with his swimming instructor. But even then, even as a little kid, he realizes this feeling of being cared for is something he feels like he wasn't meant to have.
Wow.
And he calls this the birth of shame. It's almost like at that moment, there's this fundamental disconnect.
Right.
A good thing, feeling safe, but it triggers this sense of wrongness, like he's not worthy of it.
It's just so sad to think about a child already carrying that weight.
It's so heavy. And it just makes this other memory he shares even more heartbreaking. He talks about being terrified of fire truck sirens when he was little,
Oh, yeah.
and his parents would laugh at his fear, like they never comforted him.
No reassurance, no holding him, nothing like that.
Nothing.
Mm.
And then years later, he talks about instinctively comforting his own cat during a thunderstorm,
Oh, my God.
offering his pet the exact kind of comfort he never received.
Eh.
It just gets to me every time I read it.
It's like he innately understands what he needed but never got. It makes you think about the impact of that absence.
For sure. And that kind of leads into how he describes his home life. He calls it a house of unspoken rules and child abuse.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. He talks about physical abuse, never feeling any affection, this idea that love was duty,
Not love freely given, just an obligation.
Exactly. And respect was demanded, not earned.
That creates such a power imbalance, so unhealthy.
Totally. He paints this picture of his dad
Yeah.
as this figure of unshakable silence.
Which is just as terrifying in a way, right? Like you never know what's coming.
It's that constant unease. And then his mom was like a storm you learn to anticipate. You could just feel the tension in that house.
So much walking on eggshells, never knowing what to expect.
Totally. And he developed this habit of automatically avoiding his father's gaze. He just always felt this, like, disapproval for just existing.
Aw, that's just awful to feel like you're inherently bad or wrong.
Right. But, and this is so interesting, he says that constant need to read his dad, to avoid negative cues, it actually helped him later on because he got really good at reading body language.
Wow, it's a skill, but born out of such a tough situation.
Absolutely. But thankfully, it wasn't all bad. He talks about his maternal grandparents being like a refuge, a shield.
Okay, that's good. Some kind of safe haven for him.
Yes. There's this really touching story where his grandmother straight up tells his parents, don't hurt him.
Wow, good for her stepping up like that.
Right. And his grandfather also expressed concern for him. They were a buffer.
Oh, I see. And that buffer eventually went away?
Exactly. They passed away, which left him and his siblings even more vulnerable.
Oh, that's so hard to lose that source of safety and support.
It is. And he even talks about how even though they had material things like Disney World trips and a pool, there are no memories of joy with my parents.
Just obligations, going through the motions.
Exactly. So even with those things, there's this underlying emotional emptiness.
It really makes you think about what truly matters in childhood.
Right. It's not the stuff, it's the connection. And speaking of connection, one of the most powerful moments in his story is when he makes his first vow. He's in his room, and he promises himself 3 things.
3 things. Okay. I'm intrigued.
First, to never become like them. Second, never lose my temper. And third, never let anyone feel unsafe because of me.
Wow. Talk about powerful, like a turning point.
It is. It's this conscious choice to break the cycle,
It's like he's looking at his own life and saying, I'm gonna do better.
And it's something he stuck to his whole life. And then in 3rd grade, he meets Paul, who he saw as a protector.
Okay, so another positive connection.
Yes. He even mentions this time years later when a dog chases them on their bikes and Paul steps in to protect him.
So it wasn't just a kid thing, it was a real bond.
It seems like it. It sounds like Paul gave him glimpses of what a supportive friend could be.
It's so important for kids to have those kinds of friendships, especially when things are rough at home.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Now, things get a little more complicated with the arrival of his extended family. He connects with his cousin Barbara.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they talk and hug,
Sounds innocent enough.
right? Just normal, loving interactions. But then his mom got jealous.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And she started making these comments, implying that he was a burden for wanting closeness.
That's so messed up.
I know. And it just reinforced this idea that needing comfort was wrong, shameful. It even affected his relationships with his other cousins.
It just makes you feel for him so much. It's like he can't even enjoy these simple connections without them being tainted.
It's so unfair.
Mm.
But even in the midst of all of this, he found joy in spending time with his younger cousins. He loved caring for them.
Oh.
He even mentions that even as a young kid, he always thought he wanted to be a parent.
That nurturing instinct was already there.
It was like this innate desire to give the care he never got. Then in junior high, he completely withdrew. He developed selective mutism at school.
Selective mutism.
Yeah, he wouldn't speak at all. He describes it as feeling like speaking would shine a spotlight on shame.
So the anxiety was just too much.
It sounds like it. And he retreated into nature to cope, which
Yeah.
makes sense,
Like,
right?
Totally. Like finding solace in a place where he didn't have to speak, where he could just be.
Exactly. But here's the thing. He wasn't completely mute. Outside of school, like on his paper route and at his job at the medical mart, he could talk.
Oh, interesting. So it was very specific to school.
It was. And that suggests it wasn't about not being able to speak, but more about the anxiety and shame being triggered in certain environments.
It's like he was testing the waters of connection in those safer, less emotionally charged settings.
Makes sense. Then, after witnessing his sister's fear, he makes his second vow. No one will ever fear me.
Wow. So each vow builds on the last one. Like he's solidifying his commitment to not being like his parents.
Totally. And his mom, she had this weird way of describing it. She'd call him a house devil and a street angel.
Okay. That's just...
It is. But later, he comes to understand it. He says he saved his kindness for those who he felt deserved it, because he always wanted parents, just not mine.
Wow. It's sad, but it makes so much sense. Like he was protecting himself, only giving his heart to those he could trust.
It's heartbreaking, but it also shows his incredible insight. Then comes this huge turning point. He meets Celta while volunteering at Georgia Regional Hospital.
Oh, interesting. He was volunteering at a psychiatric hospital.
He was. He was already thinking about getting his master's in social work, so he wanted experience.
I see. And he meets Silta there.
Yeah. She was a patient struggling with anorexia. And what's really amazing is that he chose to connect with her not as a staff member, but as a person.
That's so important, like seeing her humanity first.
Exactly. And she smiled right away. It's like this immediate spark.
I love that.
Me too. And their bond was so different from anything he'd experienced before. They weren't focused on her illness. She shared her diary entries with him.
Deep stuff. Wow.
Deep stuff. And they fell in love quickly, saying, "I love you" to each other every day.
Wow. It sounds like she was a real light in his life.
She was. And you know how he talked about never feeling like a priority in his friendships?
Right, right.
With Celta, it was different. For the first time, he felt truly seen and cherished.
It's like all those years of feeling unworthy finally started to heal.
I think so. He even shares this beautiful story about a picnic they had, and he looks over and sees her gazing at him with pure delight.
Oh, that's sweet.
It is. And it made him feel special finally. And there's another memory where they're taking a picture in the park.
Yeah.
And he's struck by how fragile she seems, especially compared to, like, a friend who was dealing with abuse.
It's like he sees in her this vulnerability that he understands so deeply.
Yes, absolutely. And despite everything going on at home, with Celta, he experienced immense joy and a sense of the possibility of love.
Like a whole new world opening up.
Exactly. And then, tragically, she passed away.
Oh, that's just devastating. After everything he went through, to find that kind of love and then lose it?
I know. He was completely heartbroken. He said he cried more than anyone at her funeral.
Oh, man.
And afterwards, he doubted whether he could ever love again or even be a good social worker, with all that grief.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, can you really help others if you're still hurting so much?
It's a natural response to such a huge loss.
Yeah.
But then life surprised him again. He met Lynn at a poetry reading.
Okay, another unexpected connection. I'm seeing a pattern here.
Right. But what's interesting is he had to force himself to go to that reading and even share his own poetry.
That takes courage. especially for someone who struggled with mutism.
Not funny. And he even makes a connection between that experience and like the need for therapists to be comfortable leading groups.
Oh, that's a good point. It's about being vulnerable and putting yourself out there.
It is. And the MC, Dusty, was really welcoming. Anyway, their relationship started as just friends, but they started meeting every day.
Okay, so a slow burn.
It was. A year later, Lynn was the one who actually pushed to make their relationship official.
That's so sweet.
Isn't it? And he talks about how happy he was when they got engaged.
Like a genuine, healthy happiness.
Yes. And Lynn was so supportive of his dream of becoming a therapist. She saw it as another way to help people.
That's beautiful. Having a partner who sees and supports your purpose.
That's it. And their marriage was great. They gave gifts. They shared their love openly. They could argue and make up easily.
All the things he didn't have growing up.
Exactly. So fast forward, he gets his master's degree and he gets a job right away as a therapist at Bryn Mawr Psychiatric Hospital.
Wow, that's great. So he's really doing it.
He is. And he shares this incredible story about working with a rape survivor named Karen.
Oh, wow. That must have been intense.
It was. She came in looking literally dead inside, he says. But by the end of the session, she was smiling.
That's incredible. What a testament to his ability to connect and create a safe space.
Absolutely. It solidified his belief in what he was doing. He went on to get his license as a clinical social worker and built this really successful private practice.
That's amazing. And you can tell it wasn't just about the success, but about the impact he was having.
Right. He was exceeding his own dreams, but more importantly, he was helping others heal after all he went through.
It's a beautiful thing. From someone who couldn't even speak in school to a therapist changing lives.
It's remarkable. His story shows how those early experiences, that birth of shame and the lack of love, really shaped him.
It's impossible to deny the impact of those early years.
Right. But it also shows how powerful connection can be. Like the love he found with Celta and Lynn was transformative.
They gave him a new lens to see himself and the world through.
They did. And ultimately, his journey is about resilience. It's about choosing not to repeat the harm, about finding purpose even after incredible pain.
And it makes you think, like, how much more could he do because of those experiences?
Exactly. Like, how did all that he went through shape his ability to empathize and help others who'd been through similar things?
It's a powerful question.
And it makes you wonder, what are the unexpected paths that lead us to our true calling? Because sometimes those paths start in the darkest places.
So true. And even in those dark places, there's always hope for healing and finding your purpose. It's a beautiful and inspiring message.
Absolutely.